Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the JoyPad podcast. I am one of your hosts, Fleming. I am here and I am drinking a purple haze, my friends. So I am having a good night already.
I'm jealous.
And I am actually. You're jealous?
Oh, I'm jealous, man. I love a good Abita Purple Haze.
Yeah, it's delicious. I am currently actually playing my typical games, War Thunder, and I'm also playing a little bit of the Rocket League recently. They have a special event that will have already passed when everybody hears this. Hope you got into that 5-year anniversary event. Can't believe that game has been out for 5 years. And I've also been playing Hearts of Iron 4. I'm trying a new strategy, basically changing up the world, making some people go communist while others go fascist. That wasn't happening in 1941. So that's been exciting as well. Tom, since you spoke first, what are you drinking and what are you playing?
Oh, thank you, sir. I am drinking a fine Gatorade Zero, the flavor of which is
blue.
Glacier Freeze.
It's just blue.
That's my favorite.
I was gonna say blue, to be honest with
No.
you.
There's multiple. Okay. As a Gatorade enthusiast, when I'm heavily running, I can tell you that there are multiple flavors of blue, and the Glacier Freeze is by far the best one.
You're actually right. I can't argue with that.
It's a
Nothing
good
I've
blue.
said is wrong. However, Gatorade Zero is gross.
No, the Zero's fine to me. It doesn't bother me.
I don't like diet stuff, the aspartame and all that Splenda stuff. That doesn't taste good to me. It has a really weird taste. But anyway, sorry, what are you playing?
I'm a G2 man myself.
Yeah.
So, in addition to the Gatorade Zero, I also have a mug of fine Kona Blend coffee in a Homestar Realty cup from the agent who helped us buy, sell, and rent our first house, who owns that company. So,
This is not a
shout out to him.
Was Strong Bad your agent?
You know what? We thought nothing but Homestar jokes the entire time we started working with them, if only. I've been playing more Dynasty Warriors 8 Empires for the most part. Trying to think of other games I've really been engaging with. More of the Outer Worlds. A lot of the Outer Worlds, I would actually say. There's been multiple days where my wife and I have just played, 6 or 8 hours of the Outer Worlds. And it just keeps going because it's a huge Fallout-style game.
Yeah.
It's great.
I can't get my wife to do 6 to 8 hours of anything.
Except
Except sleep, that is true.
My wife normally does 10 plus hours of sleep. So that's fine. So the Outer Worlds has been great. Still have not played The Last of Us 2, though I have heard from the rest of the gang here that it's anticipated that I will not like it. So I look forward to playing and possibly not liking that game.
Yeah, for any of our new listeners that hear this again a couple weeks into the future, we actually put out a special, the three of us, that played and or watched the game and had a lot of feelings and thoughts. So we're excited, Tom, when you finally get to play, what your thoughts on it are. But it's an episode already up. Go and check it out and tell us what you think about the game too.
I hope you like it.
I hope I like
it
it too, but we'll see. So anyway, why don't I throw it over to Mike Pinto? What are you playing, drinking, and thinking about on your time as you relax?
let's see. I'm doing the double beverage tonight. I scrounged through the refrigerator and found one more beer. It is a Sunny Spot grapefruit shandy, the last of its kind.
Is it really sweet?
It's pretty darn sweet, yeah.
Yeah, the shandies are typically sweet on their own, but then you start adding in grapefruit or orange and stuff, and it can get really sweet really fast.
Tomorrow I'm looking forward to picking up some peach ale from the Susquehanna Brewing Company.
Yeah.
And I'm also, of course, drinking Northeast Pennsylvania's finest tap water because gotta stay hydrated. In terms of games, I have really needed what I have been saying is a palate cleanser after playing The Last of Us 2. Again, I enjoyed the game. It's just extremely heavy and very emotional. So I've mostly been playing Stardew Valley. I've been playing War Thunder a lot, actually on my own time as well as with you guys. And I'm actually feeling pretty good about that game. I actually feel like I'm getting decent at it.
What country?
I did stick with China. So.
Oh.
You traitor.
Yeah, I know.
We're all part of the China squad.
I know.
What the heck, man. It's okay.
And then I've also been playing Song of Horror. I just finished episode 2. And man, the end of episode 1 had me stressed the heck out. It's a survival horror game. It's very slow paced and very atmospheric, so when spooky things start happening, it's like, oh no! Yeah. And I have been thinking about ketchup chips. And for some reason, the game Battleship.
Not the movie Battleship?
There was a movie?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Based on the board game.
I don't even know how that would work.
Okay.
I'm not even being facetious. I wish I were, but someone in Hollywood had the idea to adapt, I believe, Hasbro's Battleship into a movie.
Quick, Officer Jenkins, fire on B3.
B3. Yeah, that's... I don't know. I'm going to spend the next, 3 or 4 minutes thinking about that while Megan tells us what she's drinking, feeling, and playing.
Oh boy. I'm feeling better than I was last week after playing The Last of Us Part 2, so that's a positive. To kind of piggyback off of Tom and talking about adaptations of games to things, like on the television. Anyway, I don't know if you guys saw, but Bethesda and Amazon announced today that they are turning Fallout into a television series on Amazon. That seems kind of weird. I have mixed feelings about that.
Fallout seems like it would be a strange kind of choice as an adaptation.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't have a solid character
Exactly.
to revolve around.
Like, you kind of create the character's personality. Like, it just doesn't... I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how they work it out. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm more optimistic. I'm more optimistic in this day and age because I was pessimistic about The Witcher, and that turned out really good. But I kind of didn't see how they were going to do that. Then again, Geralt is a strong character, so
True.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's room to develop something.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that works out. But yeah, I am drinking Aquafina, not sponsored. And as far as what I'm playing, I'm not really playing anything this week. I kind of took... that's a lie. I did play a strong recommendation from Tom, Frog Fractions. If you haven't done so, please check it out. It's a wonderful Flash game that teaches you math. Not at all.
We're gonna talk more about Frog Fractions later too.
But please do yourself a favor and check it out. But other than that, I've kind of been taking a break from playing games just after my general overall feeling after playing The Last of Us Part 2. So yeah, I'm going to stop rambling and pass it back to Fleming, who is leading the topic this week.
Topic discussioner, dude. Facilitator?
There you go.
Topic facilitator?
No,
All right,
it's officially topic discussioner dude now.
So, yeah, it's a topic... Dude, yes. Topic discussioner dude. So this week is going to kind of be a continuation of the last, 15 minutes of the previous episode of our podcast, where we're going to be discussing games that we think no one else in the group knows. Now, maybe you guys have already shared some ideas and, the person found out about the game, but try to surprise somebody in this... a game that you haven't, or that you have played that they haven't played. Something very obscure, potentially a really good game, but think from the past, 30 years approximately of all of our lives. Think about the games that you've played and try to come up with something. So last week, at the end of the last week, we were talking about Titanic Adventure Out of Time, which was a hilarious conversation. Check it out if you didn't. But this week, I had another game that I want to mention that I think, Mike Pinto, you will find very intriguing, just because it is an RTS game. Back in, 96, 97, there was a game called Outpost that came out. I don't know if anyone knows that game.
Sounds familiar.
No.
Long story short about the game is that the human race is destroyed by natural events. Basically, on the cinematics of the game, it is destroyed by meteors, similar to a dinosaur kind of event. The humans that could escape do. It's approximately, I would say, 300 people escape. And you're looking for worlds in a cryogenic state for... It's supposed to be some 100 years or so, 50 years, something quite a long time, far away from Earth, outside of our solar system, if not our galaxy. And they finally find a world that's habitable but not great. and then it turns into effectively a civil war. So basically, Eden, one of the factions, wants to cultivate the world, make it into a new Earth, and the other group, Plymouth, want to, be new Voyagers and kind of go to their new Plymouth Rock and keep the world and make it, survive in the world's environment without terraforming it. Long story short, two events occur. One, the Eden group uses scientists and creates something called the Blight, which is something similar to, like the Mist kind of thing, where like it's going to kill you if you're in it. And the Plymouth group actually have volcanic eruptions, like destroy them and natural storms and stuff. Long story short, you play as one of the two civilizations, and you have a civil war. You have to like collect data to get enough stuff to build a rocket ship. You keep evacuating at the end of every single episode. Mission, there's the word, mission, you have to escape. The game's actually really cool. It's very robotic. You never play as a human directly, but there's like stories that you read throughout. It's a really fun game. And if no one's ever played it, it's from, like I said, about 1997. Really good game.
1994, believe it or not. So even earlier.
Oh, even earlier, yeah. I remember
took
from
a Google.
97. It's a really cool game. Outpost 2 came out later, I think. Maybe that's the one that I played more of. But really good game, really enjoyable. And I'm just curious, what kind of games. In fact, that was actually my first RTS game that at least I can remember, even before StarCraft came out. So like this kind of put me into that sci-fi kind of, environment and world. I bet you I still have that CD somewhere. I doubt it plays on Windows 10, but definitely, a game that introduced me to RTS and is, I think, a game that none of you ever played before, and is super interesting story-wise. Kind of goes into, I think it was actually based on a book, if I remember right too. So really obscure game, and a game that kind of touched me in some way. Not super awesome. I could definitely dive into the story a little bit, but effectively whichever one you play as wins, if you will, and evacuate, but they still take the other civilization's children at the end to kind of, live on. But everyone else in that colony dies, unfortunately. But it's a really cool game.
I have some good news. It appears that archive.org has Outpost on their archived games. So it looks like you're able to play that through archive.org. As well as Amazon.com has a new copy in box, it looks like, with Prime shipping for the low price of $19.97. But there's only one left in stock, so order soon.
Well, obviously, someone that's watching the podcast is going to have to jump on that before it disappears. I'm surprised they have a new in-box of that.
Actually, I don't think it is new in box. It says original case, single CD, and original case, owner's manual, and installation guide. So it looks like it's just
was, if I remember it, the case was just one of those white, like, flat. You know what I'm talking about? Those little like white sleeves that games came in a lot. You know what I'm talking about? Those ones. That's what I think came in.
It has a nice box. It has some nice art.
Okay.
Is it a CD-ROM or is it a floppy?
Yeah, it's a CD-ROM. CD-ROM. Really good game. Game that kind of touched me way back when. Thank you, Tom, for the information. I'll jump right on that.
That's my research skills at work.
But really good game. Game that definitely touched me. And
shaped you for years to come.
Yeah, well, it shaped me because like when StarCraft came out, it to me was very similar in the idea of humans have gone out in the world. The backstory of the Terran, for example, is like they were like prisoners, if I understand correctly, and they were like sent away from Earth. So like really cool stuff like that. Kind of those games. The Outpost game kind of led me into StarCraft when that came out, which led me into obviously StarCraft 2, and it was an RTS, kind of clunky because all the RTSs from that time frame were pretty clunky. And Warcraft 2 came out around then too. So like it was a whole RTS genre for me right around that time, and that's the one that I've never, I don't think, mentioned to any of you except for, prep work for the podcast. Definitely a game that touched me. But I've talked plenty of time. That's one game. Maybe we'll jump back into Titanic Adventure on time later. But what games do you guys have that are pretty obscure, you think no one else has played, that kind of touched you in some way, or has a funny story like Adventure Out of Time, something like that?
We touched on it a little bit earlier. We were kind of brainstorming some topics together last night, and the one that kind of came to mind for me was a game called Frog Fractions, which is not an older, obscure game from my childhood, but kind of an internet oddity. If you are listening to this podcast and you have any interest in Frog Fractions and having a surprise, fun little jaunt for yourself, don't listen to what I'm about to say. Google Frog Fractions and go play it in browser. It's a Flash game. It's not very intense. It's just fun. So without further ado, I'm going to talk about Frog Fractions a little bit. So Frog Fractions is actually kind of subversive. It's kind of masked as like an educational game in the old style, like, kind of Reader Rabbit or something like that. But you kind of just start out as a frog on a lily pad with some apples around you that start to ripen and fall, and there's bugs, and you have to catch them with your tongue. And when you do, fractions show up. There's a score and everything. And the score is kept in fractions as the fractions light up. So you'll end up with like a 570 over 972 score and stuff like that. There's really just like nothing fractional. Like, it doesn't teach you anything about fractions. So as you progress, you can buy items. So the first item that really advances things is there's a turtle. And when you get the turtle, you can go down. And when you go down, you go under the sea, and you find a bunch of apples, like so many that it just fills up your gauge to infinity. Then you can buy an upgrade that's a dragon, and instead of riding on a turtle, you ride on a dragon. And then you can buy warp drive, where your frog takes off and flies to Bug Mars, where he is promptly arrested and put into bug court.
So again, you three played this, I believe, together in the past couple of days. I have not played this game at all, but obviously I have to listen to the podcast, and I'm like, what's going?
You have to try it.
I will be trying.
It sounds
Every
like a game
I
that was made by Adult Swim, and it plays like a game that was made by Adult Swim.
Interesting.
110%. Like the controls are pretty good though. Like actually even earlier before you buy the upgrades, and you're still just licking bugs to get points, it changes from fractions to decimals at one point, and then from decimals to scientific notation, and then what was the other? Oh, and then it switches to a typing game, so you have to type in order to catch the bugs.
That's as far as I got.
Give you a word to type. So
this is a Flash game, like on a website.
It's a Flash game. Yeah, if you just Google Frog Fractions, it'll show up, and you can play it very easily.
That's kind of just surprising, because like Flash games were out for years. Early 2000s were like the really height of the Flash game. There was like Undergrounds.com, right?
Yeah.
That was what it was called.
Newgrounds.
Newgrounds. Excuse me, I said Undergrounds. Newgrounds. I'm thinking of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. Hey. But Newgrounds, and there's a bunch of others too.
Shockwave is what I always think of.
Yeah, Shockwave was another one.
Once you're on Bug Mars, you have to pass a naturalization test to prove to them that you're a bug and you can belong on Bug Mars, even though you're a frog that eats bugs.
So you're going covert, basically.
More or less.
And then you become a mass murderer.
No, you don't. Because they just give you a bunch of options to kind of pick for a number of questions. So it becomes like 6 multiple choice answers for like 10 questions or something like that. After which, if you pass, you'll be issued your Bug Mars ID and naturalization, which you get to sign, and you get to sign your name on the ID. After that, was there anything else there, Megan, before you get to the next kind of bug catching stage?
I don't think so. I just think it goes to the next stage.
Yeah. So the next stage kind of goes back to the original mechanic where you're floating around on water and catching bugs and scoring fractions. But again, you can go under the sea, and when you do, there's a maze under the sea on your dragon. So you float around in an undersea maze for a while until you get to the end of the maze, at which point the game becomes a text adventure. It's a pretty lengthy text adventure, and it has a number of different recognized commands by a text parser. And I don't know if you guys have played many text adventures.
No.
I actually, a little bit. But keep going.
Yeah. But basically, for those who are listening, if you're not familiar, the idea is that everything is represented by text. It's a written story, and you tell the game what you want your character to do by typing like open door or look at room or something like that. So it does a very good job of interpreting a lot of words, which for anyone who's played a text adventure is pretty impressive because most of them didn't, and most of them kind of sucked at that. So once you get through the whole text adventure thing, which is very long, you become the president of Bug Mars. And then once you're the president of Bug Mars, your job is to create bug pornography and sell bug pornography.
I missed out, man.
Yep.
What?
But if you don't do a good enough, well, you have to balance the ratios of your marketing and how much money you want to put into lighting and catering and stuff.
This game is taking a massive turn.
So that determines how well you do, like how much money you make back, how many Zorkmids you make back on selling your bug pornography. And you can buy upgrades all the while. It starts bringing back the upgrade menu and lets you spend Zorkmids to buy upgrades. But if you're not doing too well at selling your bug pornography, you can take a bailout from yourself because you're the president of Bug Mars. So you can just fund your own operation with the taxpayers' money.
Your own pornography.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So that's basically the story of Frog Fractions, replete with 100% spoilers, except for the text adventure, which is very dense, and I just can't get it at all.
You mentioned text adventure. That was the other game that was on my mind. Actually, it's a text adventure. Did anyone ever? It's not quite an adventure, text adventure in the same concept, but have you ever played? Tom, most likely you played a game called Hacknet. No?
Sounds a little bit familiar, but I don't remember.
Hacknet puts you in the world of being a hacker in a group. I forget what the group's name is, but basically in a Hacknet console. It's an entirely Linux console-looking game. So everything comes off as text, and you basically have the right commands and run, programs to hack into computers. So like you'll be jumping between computers. So like you'll start by hacking, I don't know, let's just say a public library. And from the public library, you'll jump into the state research center. And then the state research center, you'll jump over to the state, government, which then gets you into like a military complex, which lets you steal some kind of military battle plans. I don't know, I'm making something up because I haven't played in about 2 years now. But the game's really cool because, the scripting of those is kind of, if you're going to run like a worm, you just type in the command to run the worm. You don't like create your own worm, but you have to it's almost like a detective figure it out kind of game too, because you're like trying to figure out what computers you can access, which then would allow you to hack into a specific port on that machine and then basically do back work. And it actually has there's multiple mods because it's a text game. It's so easy to write mods for it.
Oh yeah.
There's tons of mods for the game, but the base game itself, I think actually took me probably like 20 hours of gameplay.
Wow.
And totally like a different style game that I was totally not used to. And as, it wasn't computer science, but as an information systems major, I can tell you that it was very helpful to have Linux experience and kind of know what some of those Linux commands do. But I didn't think it was necessary, especially because you could always retry tasks or they would kind of teach you a little bit on the way too. But like there's pretty thriving... my witchcraft there, but pretty thriving community around the game. I think there's like actually a Reddit and like people have made mods for it. I think one was called like Hotline Miami or something like that.
Oh,
something
that's a good
Miami.
game.
Yeah, I forget the exact
Heard
wording of that, but really, really good game. And like if anyone that's if someone stumbles on this podcast and let's say you're a 17, 18-year-old student who's considering going into computer science or wants to learn at least some basic Linux commands, it's a really good game to kind of get an idea. If you're interested at all in computer security, which I'm in computer security, it actually teaches you some very simple basics of, compromised systems, how hackers move around. It's very basic. You're not going to learn anything super intense, but it does give you the concepts, which is really cool and really interesting. It's one of those games that kind of educates you slightly. I think I've talked about that before. Probably is going to be one of my topics coming up of games that educate you as you play, which are really good games, in my opinion. Like some of the best games have that kind of concept. If you're looking to learn something like that, it's a great game to jump into.
It's actually, when you bring up that kind of console command, almost like emulation of hacking game, it just reminds me of like the sub game within Enter the Matrix, which I don't know if any of you guys ever played that game.
No.
I am unabashed huge Matrix nerd. I played the Matrix Online for basically the entirety of its life cycle and was a very involved player in the role play scene there. But in Enter the Matrix, there was a sub game which basically ran on like a DOS platform and accepted all sorts of like DOS commands. So it was basically kind of a game to hack into different things through like a DOS network. And eventually, like, you would get different things. Like, you could unlock like a sword in the game, and then you could use the sword. You could unlock a fighting mode. There was actually a like Mortal Kombat style fighting mode to Enter the Matrix that would let you go 2-player even. And it had all kinds of little snippets like movie clips and stuff like that. But it really made you go through all of like actual DOS commands, and even had like some time locked kind of hacking like mini games and stuff like that. So
yeah, Hacknet had similar things. If you stayed in a system for too long and their system administrator catches you or whatever, you have to jump out. You have to hack into your ISP, and you need to basically trick your ISP into thinking it was some other person. So like you just could change your IP. Again, very basic game from a concept perspective. You would definitely get caught if you did any of the stuff that the game kind of says you could do, but it gives you good concepts. If you've never been in that space, you're trying to learn something, it gives you a little bit of training on how people do stuff. And I think I even got the game for free, and when you account for all the people that create mods, since it is a text-based game, it was super cool. And people would like actually be able to like they gave like full source code basically, so you could actually download different skins for like your console, how it looked and how it worked. It was a really good game. I actually want to play it again. It's just haven't jumped back into that kind of game in a while. Mike Pinto, you're so quiet. What kind of games have you played that is pretty obscure or something you don't think we've played?
I know that we're all fans of the Guitar Hero and Rock Band series of games, which sadly have fallen by the wayside in these recent years, which I think is a shame. But I'm sure in a couple of years they'll come back around again.
Once coronavirus is done.
Yeah, maybe. Get together with your friends and play. But
share that microphone.
The company that made Rock Band, Harmonix, actually made a couple of music games before they made Rock Band. I can't remember who made Guitar Hero. Wasn't it Harmonix as well at first?
Red Octane and Harmonix.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't really matter, but they made a couple of games that came out on the PlayStation 2 called Frequency, and then it had a sequel called Amplitude. And they were music and rhythm-based games where you had to play the instruments like you do in Rock Band, but you don't have like an instrument peripheral. You use the shoulder buttons on the controller. And they actually had licensed music, so you would play stuff, it had like No Doubt. I remember David Bowie, Slipknot, Blink-182, and I was just super into those games, and it was all like psychedelic, lots of flashing lights and stuff. And a couple years ago, they actually released a new version of Amplitude on the PS4, which I own, and it went back to that old style of just using the controller and the shoulder buttons. They don't really have much licensed music because probably it was meant to be expenses. It was meant to be a lower budget game. Like, it was download only. There were no physical copies ever made. But I don't know. I just find them super fun as a musician. I just love stuff like that.
Did it sell well?
I have no idea.
I can't imagine that it did. Actually, I'm also familiar with this game. I first discovered it when playing the online demo for the PlayStation 2 because I bought the little network adapter that they had, where you had to open the expansion bay on the back, slap that bad boy in, and then plug in an Ethernet cable. But it came with a demo disc that had like a Madden game, I forget if there was a Tony Hawk, but Frequency was one of the games. And I specifically recall the song Frequency by Fear Factory as being one of the songs. And that game is so hard.
It's very hard. It really is.
Especially, like, I think the idea with the online play was to get, like, one person for every instrument. And that you were never finding one person for every instrument because they subdivided it into, like, 10 instruments or something per song. But like you were just constantly shuffling your fingers all over the gamepad, and it was tough. It was really tough.
Yeah,
especially with a technical song like a Fear Factory.
You have to have very fast fingers to play that game, and as a bassist, it's still difficult.
The reason I asked if it sold well is because you said it came out before Guitar Hero or Rock Band,
right?
Whatever one made it. So I was just curious if like they were like, hey, we've kind of got some pretty good sales for something we didn't put a lot of expense into. Let's explore them more.
Maybe Amplitude sold reasonably well because it had a lot of like pretty big artists, at least at the time. Like I said, there was Slipknot, Blink, POD, Pink.
It's just such a niche game.
It really is.
And you know what, Pinto? I know you and I have played the game too. Audio Surf.
Oh, I love Audio Surf.
I do too. But again, it's that kind of game.
Yeah.
Where it's really kind of a visualizer for your music. For anyone that is out there that hasn't played Audio Surf, I don't even know how to really describe it. You just kind of like move your mouse or keyboard and you have a little car on the screen, and your ID, depending on what mode you play, your goal is either to pick up just the colored blocks and dodge the gray blocks. That's in mono mode. Or there's a weird stereo mode where you have to collect excuse me rows of specific colored blocks, kind of like in a Tetris maneuver, which is far more challenging. It's a fun way if you want to just kind of like get into your music, and just be a little bit more engaged in the music and not anything else, to kind of play that.
Megan, what have you played that's a little bit out there? That's something, that maybe didn't sell well or is more random.
Seaman. No. I wish
I never
you had
got to play
game.
it. I wish I did.
Wait, the game's called Seaman?
Well, that's not what I'm talking about, but Pinto was talking to me last night as to whether or not I ever played a game called Seaman, which was released on the Dreamcast, where you cared for this fish with a human face, and it came with like a microphone apparatus that you would plug into the controller to like command and train it.
Command your fish.
Yeah, but I never had it. I wanted to play it, but it never happened. Maybe I should look on the internet for that. I still have my Dreamcast. But what I decided to go with, and I've talked to Pinto about this game a little bit. He hasn't really played a whole lot of it, but a game that came out in 2002 on the Nintendo GameCube. It preceded Resident Evil 4. It's called Eternal Darkness: Sanity's Requiem. And it was like the first kind of spooky game that I ever got my hands on, and I really enjoyed it. And yeah, it's like another psychological horror game, but they had some cool features. Before I get into that, though, essentially the game, you're playing as this woman named Alexandra Roivas. You find out that your grandfather was murdered. Specifically, he was decapitated, and the police aren't really able to find out what happened. So you go to this mysterious mansion that belongs to your family to investigate the murder. And in unraveling things, you find this book bound in human flesh. I think it's like called the Tome of... Oh, what is it? I can't remember. It was a book made out of human flesh, and like as you opened it, it was stitched, and you could see like birthmarks and like hair. It was gross. It was weird. But you journey throughout different time periods. There are 12 different characters that you play as, and say 4 characters will explore 4 different settings through different time periods. and your whole goal is to defeat this this jerk, Pius Augustus, who years ago went to find this artifact of power years and years and years ago, and the artifact he picked made him stronger than one type of artifact, but weaker than another. So it's following him throughout time as he's trying to hide the artifacts that could essentially kill him away from other people. A cool feature, though...
He's hiding his Horcruxes?
Exactly. But a cool feature that the game had, and I think Nintendo patented it, was the sanity meter. So if enemies spotted you, it would start to drain your sanity meter, where you would have weird effects like spooky noises, you would hear voices, it would get dark, your camera would get skewed, heads of statues would move and follow your character, but then it would get worse, where walls would start to bleed and ceilings would start to bleed, and then you would enter a room and suddenly your character would die, or it would break.
I'm surprised by that, the sanity thing, because Amnesia: The Dark Descent, which is a very popular game that came out in 20-something, 2010 to 2020, somewhere in there, that game has a sanity meter as well.
So I don't know if it was something like after the fact that's why you would see it in other games. I don't know.
Probably.
But another effect would be it would break the fourth wall, where it would, all of a sudden you'll be playing the game and you get a to be continued screen, or it would simulate errors, such as like you would get a blue screen of death, or you would see cockroaches crawl across your screen. So there were just a few different unique things that it did to mess with players.
That it's some of the stuff you said, so the sanity meter, the cockroaches across the screen, that stuff all happens. Pinto, you played Amnesia: The Dark Descent, right? That all happens in the game.
Oh, really?
Which is, it's really funny to me that you say a game from, a dozen years or earlier or so, like 10 years earlier, somewhere in there, had a lot of the similar sanity-based concepts. And Amnesia: The Dark Descent, you have a sanity meter, it starts to make your vision get blurry, you start to see bugs across your screen. I remember watching Day9 play that game, popular Twitch streamer now, YouTuber as well, and he freaked out because he thought the bug was real when it came across his screen because he was playing in the dark. He thought it was a bug, and he doesn't like bugs. I was freaking out about it. So it's just funny. And then you mentioned that like they patented it or copyrighted, that kind of concept. And it's like, how did Amnesia manage to do that then? Because that's not created by the same game dev. So I don't know how they got past that, but it's interesting. I bet you there was some degree of inspiration there for those developers from that game.
I know too, like it was, the developer was Silicon Knights, which did go under. They went bankrupt. So I wonder maybe if it had to do with Silicon Knights, but if Nintendo had the patent, I can't imagine. I'm not sure.
Confused.
Yeah.
That's disappointing if Silicon Knights went under, because they also made my favorite port of all time, which is Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes on the Nintendo GameCube, which also another game that uses that kind of fourth wall breaking mechanic, where you would have the Hideo screen, which looks like it says video almost until you realize it's Hideo Kojima's name. And all that kind of stuff. But.
Yeah, it was like a cool little effect that it added. Like I remember sitting in my room, like 13, 14 years old, playing this game, and all of a sudden, it was the first time I saw it, I get this blue screen, and I'm like, what happened? What happened to my game? Because it makes you think the game crashed and you lost everything.
Which is terrifying.
Yeah.
That's the real gauge of sanity.
It didn't have huge success, I think, commercially. It did win some awards, and it was a pretty big deal with reviewers, but overall, most people that I encounter that had a GameCube or were into this type of game, they've never heard of it, they've never played it. So,
and it's really hard to find now.
It is.
I believe that. I've definitely seen the cover before, because as soon as you mentioned it and I said it sounded familiar, I took a little Google at it, and it's definitely a familiar cover. I definitely think I saw press of it in like Game Informer and stuff like that back in the day. I didn't have a GameCube, so it's not
and it
something I
was
would have played.
M-rated, which was like, pretty big for Nintendo.
For the GameCube?
For
Yeah.
Nintendo, yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah, I found a wiki page on it, and I was like looking at it as you were talking, Megan. It looks really interesting, and for how old the game is, it's surprising just how many effects and everything they have in it.
That's impressive.
PT did that, which is part of why I loved PT so much, and I think the same for you, Megan. Like, it had a lot of those weird, like, it was just a very kind of, it was a horror game, but it was very, like, outside of the box in the way it did things.
Yeah.
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 That makes horror games good.
Exactly.
To be honest. So we could probably have a whole other discussion on that
definitely.
too. But I mean, horror really relies on the element of surprise, and anything that can catch you off guard is going to make you more scared than something that's not.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Cool. No, I'm actually interested to learn more about that game, but if I may segue.
Of course.
You
Always.
I actually have a handful of somewhat older games that I also had in mind as obscure titles. One of which I'm going to touch on just very briefly, which was a PlayStation 1 game called Rhapsody. Have any of you heard of that?
No.
The name
Rhapsody,
sounds familiar,
no.
but I would
Allow me to summarize. It sounds like it would be some sort of interesting musical game, and if you guess that it's a JRPG, you guessed right. It's actually an early Atlas title, back when Atlas was not making good games, and now they're better known for Persona and Disgaea now, but early on, I would say Atlas was kind of a trashy semi-visual novel publisher. Early on in their
Some people
imports
are
to America.
into that.
Some people are. There's nothing wrong with that.
Okay, I just
But the
want to say
quality
the
was
big,
low.
the
is
big
what I'll say.
problem with visual novels is that 95% of them are porn. They're dating sims and porn.
Yeah.
Like,
And some people are into that.
some people are into that.
Wrong with
I'm
that.
into the
Hatoful
5%.
Boyfriend?
We still haven't played that, Megan.
No, we
Still
haven't.
need to play that. But yeah, just like visual novels can be good, but it's all like, which girl am I gonna go out with?
Yeah. They're highly predicated on the dating simulator format. But anyway, in this case, this was not a visual novel game. This was a RPG, which seemed to be based on a strategy RPG, Final Fantasy Tactics kind of style when you get into it. I remember buying it as a relatively young boy, and my mom said, "Oh, you play as a girl in this. Are you okay with that?" And I was like, "Yeah, I don't care. It's gonna be like about music and strategy combat, and that's cool." And then I played it, and you play as not only a girl, but the most stereotypical girl in all the land of make-believe, where your first quest in the entire game is to bake a pie for the prince.
Ooh, what kind of pie?
I wish I were making this up. I wish.
Yeah, what kind of
Yeah,
pie?
is it a boysenberry?
I wish I could tell you, but I don't think I made it far enough to find out because the game was so stupid at that point that I had to give it up.
Listen,
maybe it got better.
I will say my favorite part of Paper Mario is when you are playing as Peach making the cake.
You do have to, yeah, and remember, in Super Mario 64, she tells Mario to come over because she baked him a cake.
So, I digress,
Listen.
though.
Listen, I all credit to Paper Mario. Paper Mario is a very tongue-in-cheek game.
It is.
Paper Mario is also very self-aware and does not lead with the entire game being genuinely about you going to bake a pie for the prince so that he'll like you. Like, that's
Yeah.
the premise of
Yeah,
Rhapsody.
that's problematic.
Yeah, it was really bad. So, needless to say, that game, which I think is actually somewhat of a rarity now, got sold back to GameStop for like $20. But the other games I wanted to talk about are actually a little bit more obscure just because they never got an official release in the US. But they were games I found on Super Nintendo emulators early on in my career of using Super Nintendo emulators. And those two games are Bahamut Lagoon and Live a Live, which is a very strange title, but again, Japanese translated. So both of these were Square releases that must have been out on a Famicom or Super Famicom and just never made it to the US, which is very interesting because I would call them both relatively Western in scope. Bahamut Lagoon is kind of a proto Final Fantasy Tactics, where you play a grid-based combat game on a Super Nintendo, grid-based RPG, and you raise dragons. And you raise them by giving them different items that help them grow. So it's almost kind of like a proto-Pokemon in that sense, because this was before Pokemon. But your dragons would evolve differently based on what you gave them, and they would become different types of dragons. So you get a poison dragon or a fire dragon or like an ice dragon. And you had different military units that would ride these dragons into combat, and the military units would fight as well. So you, again, had the grid-based RPG, strategy RPG combat system, and different like magic, attacks, abilities, stuff like that. Very cool. Sprite style, kind of in the same style of a Chrono Trigger or Final Fantasy VI. Plot, I cannot really remember, but it was kind of kingdom on kingdom battling, and you had to capture castles and stuff like that, which is pretty cool. So, and not a short game, a fully involved RPG. So I highly recommend Bahamut Lagoon as opposed to Rhapsody. Of the same token, Live a Live is an interesting game, kind of more based on the Saga game premise, where you have a handful of protagonists from different walks of life. So I remember there was a monk. I believe there was some sort of singer or something, but there was also a professional wrestler. The entire game of the professional wrestler was almost kind of Mega Man style, where you have to pick the other wrestler that you're going to go up against. And they were all from different countries and had different backstories. But the combat in that was kind of grid-based as well, but in a much smaller grid with much larger enemies and different like tile scopes of your attacks. So you might have one move that goes in like an X pattern and will hit every enemy that's in this X pattern, or something that's in a specific square and has a different stun or something like that. So, and every time as the wrestler, if you beat someone, you would learn their signature move, and then you could use it moving forward. So I thought that was really cool. One of the other ones was also a cowboy in the Wild West. And you would, it had, again, a full kind of RPG adventure mode where you had to go around the town and talk to people. But then at the end of the day, you had to go have showdowns with the groups that were trying to interfere with your town and stuff like that. So really fun games that kind of had innovation that I feel like reverberated later in Square Enix's, development cycles. But which were really kind of not played in the West unless you grabbed them on an emulator later on. So I would encourage everybody to go out and play those games.
Can I tempt you, gentlemen, with a little gem called Mr. Mosquito?
You can definitely tempt me with any game called Mr. Mosquito. Go on.
Isn't that on par with Viva Pinata? Wasn't it the same company?
I don't... Didn't Rare do Viva Pinata?
I really don't remember.
Yeah, I don't know. It's completely different. Mr. Mosquito, you play as a mosquito, and your goal is to suck the blood from people living in a specific household. So your job is to drink their blood undetected, and you can get swatted, which is instant death. Or if you are detected, your job is to, hit certain points on the human body to deter them and calm them down and to get them away from you. It came out around the same time as Katamari Damacy, which is another game that I absolutely love. But this is
Katamari's
just stupid fun. It's good for an hour. But yeah.
It sounds like cat lateral damage, which
exactly.
Yeah. Before, where you're playing as an animal and you're just having some fun, giving yourself a relaxing game experience.
Yep.
It's really interesting that the mosquito targets a specific family.
Yeah. I think it's probably you're just trapped in that house. Like there's probably a specific reason. But yeah, this was I think a PS2 release. I remember going to, I don't know if it was EB or if it was GameStop at that point, but seeing it behind the counter, and I'm like, that game, yes, please, sir, can I buy that? I think it was like $10, $15.
Well, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Games got weird on the PS2.
Yeah. So we're of the generation. I've one, well, technically two more games to talk about. We're of the generation where, for anyone younger than us, computer classes were not. They didn't really have them anymore because everybody knows how to use computers and tablets and all that. I would be surprised if a kid posted a comment that's like, "No, we still have computer classes in my school."
Oh, they teach typing still. I think they bring that in.
Okay, well,
that stuff.
When I was a kid, personally, for my computer classes, we did do some typing, but as soon as you got your work done and like you showed the teacher you got 100%, you could play the games on the computer instead. Did any of you ever play two games? One of them called Ice Cream Truck, and the other one called Hot Dog Stand?
No.
Okay, so Ice Cream Truck was a fantastic game because you played as a man who bought an ice cream truck, and then you would buy ice cream from the factory, and then based on the temperature, you would decide where to go. So, like, if it was 90 degrees outside, you probably wanted to go to the beach. But if it's like 80 and fair weather, maybe you go to the park. And then, if it's getting a little bit cold, because it's starting to hit fall season before you go into like your hibernation till the next spring, you would, want to drive over to the mall and sell at the mall or something. So like the game was really cool, and like you could expand your stuff. Like I think it was like you could build bigger fridges. You could go to certain places. You can go to multiple places in like some of the later versions of the game. And that game was just so much fun as a little kid because your goal obviously was by the end of the class to have the most money because then you're like the best. You have to compete. So that game was really fun. And then Hot Dog Stand came out later, where you are, I think, made by the same company because I think my company bought software from the same, like all our software was from the same company. A hot dog stand was you opened up a hot dog stand where you decided what to sell, how much you would stock, because if you overstocked and you didn't sell it, it would go bad. And you were based, I believe, in like a stadium kind of thing. So you were at like a football stadium or something, and you had to sell all your product. And some products didn't expire, but your hot dogs, for example, did expire. Then you could start buying other things to make more food and stuff. Really awesome game. And just as a little kid, like it was really fun because it was kind of like, it wasn't educational by any means, but it was kind of fun to like have to think about your business and how you would most effectively use your money that you had.
Capitalism.
So, I love those kind of games. Yeah, it was a capitalist game. It was a great game, though. I mean,
no, it sounds fun.
I don't know.
I mean,
I don't know if any of my friends play this kind of, or any of my friends from elementary school listen to this podcast. But if they were to, they would be like, "Yeah, I remember that game."
I actually played Soviet Borscht Stand.
Yes. So if you didn't do as well, obviously the other
well,
one.
You just set up in the same location in the park every day, and the price of your borscht is just set by whatever Stalin decrees that morning.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
Well, there's no Joseph Stalin in Hot Dog Stand, fortunately. Though I think there was some kind of like industry guy that like would adjust the prices of the hot dogs that you could buy.
Did you get like the hot dog weekly in the morning and it says like, this is what the trends are around the country.
You drove
hot
over
dogs,
to
$1.99.
As ice cream truck, you had to drive over to the factory and buy some. It was a fun game, man.
No, it sounds fun. I'm just playing around.
For a game that was on like a 1990 computer, maybe 95 computer in elementary school, it was a wonderful game. And it was pretty like cartoony, like its animations and stuff, but pretty good game overall, I would say. And it was on every computer.
I honestly think we probably could do a whole episode just about the strange old games we played in computer classes. Because I remember a ton of them. But in terms of like the oldest that I remember doing at school, I don't know if you guys use this program, but there was a quote unquote turtle program. Which is kind of based on very early, very simple computer graphic designs. Because the idea is you just had a triangle and it would just draw a line wherever it went. And in order to make the game more interesting, they had transparency sheets with mazes on them. that they would put up on the computer screen, not actually as part of the integrated software, but this would just go on the screen, and you would have to work your turtle through the maze that way. And it was basically like you would have to tell the turtle like up 5 spaces, right 5 spaces, left 5 spaces. And the savvy kids in class would figure out how to change the color of the turtle line. Yeah, you were a cool kid if you could figure out how to change the color of the turtle. So that was, these were on like Apple II computers that the school had. But, as we went on, we had Scooter's Magic Castle, Putt Putt Saves the Zoo, games like that. Kid Pix. I don't know if you guys played around with the horribly unusable proto Photoshop software that was Kid Pix.
No.
But yeah, everyone did the same thing with Kid Pix. You would draw some weird line, and then you would grab the bucket tool and just fill in different colors inside all of the different intersections. Because no one else knew what the heck they were doing with Photoshop software in 6th grade. So oh yeah,
I remember we had this. It was like it had to be a Nintendo game of sorts, but it was like. It would be Mario characters like Peach, Luigi, Yoshi, but playing backgammon, or you played checkers, and it was just like stupid card games or tabletop games that you would play as Mario characters. That was the most exciting thing we had.
Oh, that reminds. So, I just have to give a little bit of a honorific to my grandfather, who passed many years ago, but. Really got me into computing because he had multiple DOS machines and eventually had a Windows 95 computer. But he had all kinds of games for those, so my cousin and I used to play these. One of them was called Hoyle, which was developed by Sierra. And you could tell it was developed by Sierra because it would incorporate characters from Sierra games into like card games. So, Megan, where you're just talking about like backgammon and stuff like that, there would be poker, and you could play poker against Roger Wilco and Leisure Suit Larry and stuff like that. And the most fun was always just if you bluffed high enough, you would win. So I would just bet like $20,000 on like every hand and just keep taking everybody's money. But they had all kinds of like little games like that with Sierra characters.
That's cool.
It was an interesting time, those older games.
Yeah, I loved those older games when I was young. Looking at the time, we are getting pretty close to the end here. Thanks for partaking in telling obscure games. If anyone has any thoughts that listen to the podcast, let us know your obscure games that you've seen. Am I missing any games that you guys wanted to talk about? I think we got through everything. Okay.
I want to hear all about some of our listeners' crazy games.
Yeah.
I do too. I want to hear about some of our listeners' games because the best part about like the world we're in now is like it's plenty of time. So if someone says, "Hey, look up this game," you're gonna probably find at least a screenshot online. I've already been screenshotting Ice Cream Truck. Seems like they made ones for Android, which is hilarious to me. They made it for Android. I wonder if it costs money. I would totally play that game. But yeah, so I guess at this point we'll wrap up here. Thanks everyone for listening and tuning in. Catch us on Facebook at JoyPad Pod, Instagram at JoyPad Pod, Twitter as well too, and on YouTube we are JoyPad. We have been posting some playthroughs of Diablo 3. Mike Pinto and I have been playing a game called A Way Out, which we're super excited to talk about too.
That game
in a
is
future.
good.
Oh, you played it? Okay, yeah, we're super excited to talk about that. Yeah, it was on the Steam sale that was going on, Steam Summer Sale. Look for it. But yeah, I think that's everything. Did I miss anything that we typically... No?
No.
I think you got everything.
Cool.
I think anyone that looks for our Twitter should prepare for disappointment, but enjoy it. Play Frog Fractions.
Do it.
Play Frog Fractions. Look up all the other games, and we're probably gonna... I have to play for these 3 Titanic Adventure at a time.
Yes.
Last week
Can't wait.
That's going to be hilarious. But anyway, I think that's everything. I'm getting a call from potential spam, excuse me. So Tom, why don't you give us our slogan and we'll get out of here.
All right, everyone. Stay joyful and bake
Thanks.
pies for your princes.
Talk to everyone later. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.